Jayden had always been taught that kindness didn't cost a thing. His grandmother, who raised him, often reminded him that doing good would always find its way back. But on this particular evening, as he walked home from school, he had no idea how true those words would become. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an amber glow over the quiet suburban street. Jayden kicked a small rock along the sidewalk, deep in thought about his homework and the chores waiting for him at home. He knew his grandmother would be expecting him soon, and he didn't like to keep her waiting. As he neared the next intersection, something unusual caught his eye. A sleek, black luxury car pulled over on the side of the road. The vehicle was clearly expensive, the kind Jayden had only seen in magazines or movies. But what stood out even more was the man crouched beside it, struggling with a flat tire. The man was dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, his white dress shirt crisp even as he wiped sweat from his forehead. He looked frustrated, glancing at his phone before sighing heavily. Something about him seemed out of place, like he wasn't used to dealing with this kind of problem himself. Jayden hesitated for a moment. His grandmother always warned him to be cautious around strangers, especially ones driving expensive cars. But as he watched the man struggle, something inside him pushed him forward. He had seen his uncle change a tire once before. Maybe he could help. "Excuse me, sir," Jayden said cautiously, stepping closer. "Do you need help?" The man turned, startled. His sharp, assessing gaze softened slightly when he saw Jayden, just a kid, no older than 12, wearing a worn-out backpack and scuffed sneakers. Yeah," the man admitted, exhaling. "I was supposed to meet someone for an important meeting, but I hit a nail back there. I called roadside assistance, but they're taking forever." Jayden nodded and glanced at the tools scattered around. The man had clearly tried but wasn't making much progress. "I think I can help," Jayden offered. The man raised an eyebrow. "You know how to change a tire?" "A little," Jayden said with a shrug. "I've watched my uncle do it before." The man hesitated but then stepped back. "Be my guest." Jayden knelt beside the car, gripping the lug wrench with small but steady hands. The bolts were tight, but he put all his weight into it, feeling them budge slightly. As he worked, the man watched, first with amusement, then with genuine surprise. "You're a hard-working kid," the man commented. Jayden just smiled and kept going. Within minutes, he had the spare tire in place. He stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "All done," he said, stepping back. The man let out a low whistle. That was impressive. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. "Here, take this. You just saved me a big headache." Jayden glanced at the money, then shook his head. "No, thank you. My grandma says you should help people, just because it's the right thing to do." The man stared at him for a moment, then smiled. "What's your name, kid?" "Jayden," he replied. "Well, Jayden, I think I'd like to meet your grandmother someday. And I have a feeling this won't be the last time we see each other." At that moment, Jayden had no idea just how right the man was. "Let me know if you'd like any tweaks." Jayden didn't think much about the encounter as he walked the rest of the way home. He had done what he felt was right, helped someone in need just as his grandmother had always taught him. That was enough for him. But he had no idea that his small act of kindness had set something much bigger in motion. That evening, as he sat at the kitchen table doing his homework, his grandmother watched him with a knowing smile. "You're quiet tonight," she said, setting a steaming plate of cornbread and stew in front of him. "Something on your mind?" Jayden shrugged. "I helped a man change his tire on the way home. He offered me $100, but I told him no." His grandmother paused, studying him carefully. Then she nodded. "That's my boy," she said proudly. "We don't do good expecting something in return, but kindness has a way of finding its way back to you." Jayden smiled, though he doubted the man would remember him beyond a day. But the very next afternoon, something unexpected happened. As he walked out of school, Jayden spotted the same sleek black car from the day before parked near the entrance. Standing beside, it was the man from the flat tire incident, dressed just as sharply as before. Jayden slowed his pace, unsure if he should approach. The man, however, noticed him immediately and waved him over. "Jayden, good to see you again." Jayden hesitated, then walked up to him. Hey, sir," Everything okay? The man chuckled. Better than okay. I've been thinking about our little encounter yesterday. You impress me, kid. Not just with how quick you fixed that tire, but with your character. Jayden glanced down, feeling a little embarrassed by the praise. I was just doing what my grandma taught me. The man nodded approvingly. That's rare these days. Most people would have taken the money and walked away. You didn't. That says something about you. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a small card. My name's Mr. Lawson. I run a few businesses in the city. I believe in helping young people with potential, and I think you have a lot of it. He handed Jayden the card. I'd like to invite you to come by my office this weekend. Nothing big, just a tour, a little talk about life and opportunities. Jayden stared at the card, unsure what to say. He was just a kid from a small neighborhood. What could a businessman like Mr. Lawson possibly see in him? You don't have to decide now, Mr. Lawson said, sensing his hesitation. Talk to your grandmother about it. But I have a feeling you're meant for something big, Jayden. With a smile, he gave Jayden a firm nod before stepping into his car and driving off, leaving the boy standing there, staring at the card in his hand. Jayden had no idea, but his life had just taken a turn he never could have imagined. Jayden spent the rest of the evening staring at the small business card in his hand, running his fingers over the embossed gold lettering. Mr. Lawson, CEO, entrepreneur, investor. The words didn't mean much to him yet, but something about them felt important. His grandmother noticed his distraction at dinner. What's on your mind, child? She asked, her voice warm yet knowing. Jayden hesitated before sliding the card across the table. She picked it up, squinting at the fine print before looking back at him. And where did you get this? He cleared his throat. Remember the man I helped with the flat tire? That's him. He came to my school today. He said I impressed him and wants me to visit his office this weekend. His grandmother's eyes lingered on the card, her expression unreadable. And what do you think about that? Jayden shrugged, unsure of how to put his thoughts into words. I mean, I'm just a kid. Why would someone like him want to talk to me? She smiled knowingly. Sometimes the right people see things in us before we see them in ourselves. She set the card down and met his gaze. You helped that man without expecting anything. Maybe this is God's way of sending something back to you. If your heart says yes, you should go. Jayden thought about it for a moment. His heart did say yes. Saturday morning arrived with a mix of excitement and nerves. Jayden dressed in his best, clean jeans, a collared shirt, and his only pair of decent sneakers. His grandmother gave him a reassuring nod before he set off to meet Mr. Lawson at his office downtown. When he arrived, his eyes widened at the sight of the towering glass building. It looked like something out of a movie. The lobby was massive, with polished floors, tall windows, and people in suits moving with purpose. The receptionist greeted him warmly. You must be Jayden. Mr. Lawson is expecting you. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened on the top floor, revealing an office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Mr. Lawson stood by his desk, smiling. Glad you made it, Jayden. Come in. Jayden stepped inside, feeling both small and important at the same time. Mr. Lawson gestured to the leather chair across from him. I wanted you to come here because I believe in rewarding good character. You could have taken the money and walked away that day, but you didn't. That tells me you're different. Jayden shifted in his seat. I just did what I thought was right. Mr. Lawson nodded. And that's exactly why I want to help you. I grew up in a rough neighborhood, too. People saw something in me and gave me opportunities that changed my life. Now, I want to do the same for you. Jayden's heart pounded. How? Mr. Lawson leaned forward. How would you like a mentor? Someone to teach you about business, leadership, and success? I want to show you what's possible beyond what you see every day. Jayden's mind raced. No one had ever offered him something like this before. He thought of his grandmother's words. Sometimes the right people see things in us before we see them in ourselves. For the first time, he felt like his future was bigger than he had ever imagined. And he was ready to chase it. Jayden never imagined that a simple act of kindness could open the doors to a world he had only seen from a distance. But now, sitting in Mr. Lawson's high-rise office, he realized that his life was about to change in ways he never expected. Their mentorship began the very next weekend. Mr. Lawson didn't waste time with small talk. He got straight to business. Success isn't just about money, Jayden, he said during their first meeting. It's about mindset. If you want to change your life, you have to change the way you think. Jayden listened intently as Mr. Lawson explained concepts like financial literacy, leadership, and the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people. Each lesson felt like a window into a world he never knew existed. At first, it was overwhelming. Words like investments, assets, and networking sounded foreign to him. But Mr. Lawson was patient. You don't have to understand everything today, he reassured Jayden. Just keep learning. Growth takes time, and so Jayden did. Over the next few months, he spent weekends shadowing Mr. Lawson at business meetings, listening to conversations that once seemed like another language. He watched as the millionaire made decisions with confidence and handled problems with a level of calm that amazed him. One afternoon, after meeting with a group of investors, Mr. Lawson turned to Jayden and asked, "What did you learn from that?" Jayden thought for a moment. That confidence matters. You didn't second-guess yourself, even when people questioned you. Mr. Lawson smiled. Exactly. People will doubt you, especially when you come from nothing. But the way you carry yourself can change how the world sees you. Jayden took those words to heart. Inspired by what he was learning, he started thinking about how he could apply these lessons in his own life. He noticed that many kids in his neighborhood didn't believe in their own potential. They assumed that success was only for people who came from wealth or privilege. That didn't sit right with him. So, Jayden decided to take action. He gathered a few friends and shared what he had been learning. They met at the local library where he talked about leadership, goal setting, and even small ways to make money. At first, only a handful of kids showed up, but word spread. Soon, more and more young people from his community began to listen. One evening, Mr. Lawson surprised him by showing up at one of these gatherings. He stood in the back, watching as Jayden confidently spoke about the power of believing in yourself. Afterward, Mr. Lawson pulled him aside. "You're already making an impact," he said. This is just the beginning. For the first time in his life, Jayden truly believed it. He wasn't just learning, he was growing. And more importantly, he was ready to become someone who could change lives, just like Mr. Lawson had done for him. Years later, Jayden stood at the front of a packed auditorium, staring at the sea of young faces looking up at him with hope in their eyes. The same hope he once carried. The hope that life could be bigger than what they had always known. He took a deep breath and smiled. This is where I was always meant to be. It had been a long journey from the day he helped Mr. Lawson change that tire. What started as a mentorship had evolved into something much greater. Under Mr. Lawson's guidance, Jayden had learned not only about business and leadership, but about perseverance, discipline, and giving back. He worked hard, studied relentlessly, and made the most of every opportunity. By the time he graduated from college, something no one in his family had ever done before, he already had his own small business. But his heart had always been with his community, and he knew that his success meant nothing if he couldn't use it to help others. So, he went back to where it all began. Jayden started a youth mentorship program in his old neighborhood, providing workshops on leadership, financial literacy, and personal growth. He wanted to teach kids the same lessons that had changed his life. Lessons about believing in themselves, taking risks, and refusing to let their circumstances define their future. At first, it was just a handful of students meeting in a small community center. But just like before, word spread. More and more young people began to show up, eager to learn. Schools started inviting him to speak, and before he knew it, he was standing on stages inspiring thousands. One evening, after delivering a speech at a high school, he spotted an elderly woman waiting for him near the exit. His heart swelled when he recognized her. "Grandma," he said, his voice filled with emotion. She smiled proudly, reaching up to touch his face. "I always knew you were meant for something bigger." Jayden swallowed the lump in his throat. "I wouldn't be here without you." She shook her head. "No, child. You wouldn't be here if you hadn't made the choice to be kind that day. One small act can change everything." She was right. Jayden often thought back to that moment. The flat tire, the decision to help, the opportunity that followed. It had been so simple at the time, yet it had set his entire life on a different course. Now he was doing the same for others. That night, as he sat in his office, an office that looked eerily similar to the one Mr. Lawson had once invited him into, he smiled at the framed photo on his desk. It was a picture of him and Mr. Lawson on the day he started his first business, a reminder of how it all began. The phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a young student from his mentorship program asking for advice. Jayden picked up the call, ready to do what Mr. Lawson had once done for him. Because success wasn't just about making it, it was about reaching back and lifting others along the way.